Alright, so for this tutorial I'm going to be showing you guys how to create a weapon attachment for CryEngine 3 SDK version 3.4.5. So there's three things you're going to need. You're going to need the CryEngine 3 SDK, you're going to need the CryEngine 3 free SDK sample assets, and you're going to need 3ds Max. I'm going to be using 2012. I believe they support all the way back to 9. But maybe even 8, but I'm not 100% sure. You will need the CryEngine 3 exporter installed in 3ds Max as well. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to copy our sample assets from the sample assets provided by Crytek and put them into our free SDK. I've extracted my free SDK and my sample assets to the C drive, as you can see here. So go ahead and open up sample assets, and you'll see an animations and objects folder. Go ahead and copy those. Now I'm going to go back to C drive and go into my free SDK. And then I'm going to go into the game folder, and then I'm just going to paste it in here. I believe yeah, there we go. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is go ahead and open up the objects folder, and then go into weapons, SCAR, and you will see a SCAR FP file. You want to open up the 3ds Max scene file. So if you go ahead and double click on that, that should open. Alright, once Max is launched, you should see this CryEngine settings. Go ahead and click save. Then this file load gamma and let setting mismatch will come up. I just leave it on default and hit OK. I've never had any problems with it. Go ahead and hit continue. Now if you'll see, I'm in camera mode. I actually want to change my view. So I'm going to click on the little plus up here on the top left and go to change viewports. I'm going to go to layout and change it to a quad. Hit OK. Now down here on the bottom right you'll see maximize viewport button. Go ahead and unclick that. I'm actually going to change this view to perspective. I'm going to change this one to top. This one's going to be left, and this one's going to be front. Hit Z, center everything up. Okay. Now, first thing is first, I'm going to change my timeline settings here, and to make the start time 0, make that 1000. Now I'm going to go to the very first keyframe. That way everything is centered correct. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to list view, and I'm going to select SCAR FP. Now there is 2 SCAR FPs, so we have to make sure we select the right one. Okay, that is the correct one because I can actually see the iron sights up here. Now I'm going to right click in a blank area and hide unselected. Now I just have the new SCAR. So first thing we're going to do for this is I'm going to go ahead and delete the iron sights. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over here to modify. I'm going to go to editable poly, and I'm going to tell it yes, hold. And now I'm going to select the element tool, and I'm basically just going to rip the irons right off of this in the most unprofessional way possible. Ta-da! Done. Now we're going to go back to skin. Everything's going to be alright, no worries. Now, go ahead and, with this model selected, go ahead and go over to your Tools tab and open up your CryEngine 3 exporter. If you don't have this button here, I'm assuming some of you have general modeling knowledge by now, but you can configure it to this, and you'll find it over here, CryEngine 3 exporting. You can simply just drag it over here and assign it to a button. See how I have 3 of them now? I mean 2 of them. Let's get it and realize it selected both. Okay, so now you want to click remove, clear list, because this SCAR FP is the wrong SCAR FP. It defaults to the other one for some reason. Even if you assign it, it'll keep reverting. So you literally have to clear the list and add selected each time. If you hit add selected and nothing happens, that means you don't have your gun physically selected in the scene. So now that that's done, I'm going to leave export file per node selected and just click export. And it's going to straight up ask you, would you like to overwrite? It's asking us if we want to overwrite this CGF file right here. CHR file, I'm sorry. CHR, I don't know where this is the CHR file right here, I believe. Yes, CHR. scarfp.chr. Would you like to overwrite? Yes. It's going to blam. Done. Iron sights removed. Moving on. Alright, so now that we've got that export, I'm just going to close Max for now. Yes, I am going to save the scene file, and it's going to tell you it's read-only. So, I'm just going to go and make it read-only, because I have a backup of it. Save it. Blam. Now we can close it. And, looky there. No iron sights. Imagine that. So when we zoom in, nothing. Right? Right. Good. That's where we want to be. Alright, so now that we're back in 3ds Max with the same scar file we were just working with, now we're going to mock up the new site. So I'm going to do a super basic site, so don't judge me. I'm going to start with the cylinder. Wait, I don't want a cylinder, I want a tube. I'm just going to do like a basic ACOG style. So I'm going to create something about like this. Nothing fancy smancy. Maybe come over here, take out some segments, height, why am I reversed? I'm going to make it about right there. Right off the bat, I'm going to zero it up. There we go, so it's dead center. Alright, it is important to make sure that it's dead center. The X is 0. Mostly because if you don't, it's going to make it that much harder when you're in-game to center it up. Overhead views, you can see it's pretty centered with the weapon. There's 2 ways to do the next part. You can do a flat tube or cylinder and just delete the other faces. Like so. If I went over here and made this an editable poly, you could basically just take all the rest of the faces and delete them. And then you would have just this flat surface to put a texture on, and that would be what your reticle would be for your site. We're not going to do that because to be honest with you, I haven't used transparent textures in quite a while with CryEngine, so we're not going to do that. I'm just going to do it super cornball style and do it tiny little cylinder for red dot. Let's go over here, make it small, something like that. Segment 0. It doesn't really matter what the segments are because I'm going to delete them anyways. Polygon. I'm just going to delete these polygons. Did I select that? Yeah. So now I just have this cute little red dot here. Once again, make sure the X is set to 0. As far as the Z is concerned, I'm going to set it to the same Z as the site. That way it's dead center. There. Now both of these are the same. Oh, that's not what I wanted. So actually now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the outer tube we made. Oh, actually I need to move that into the correct spot so it's actually in the site. I'm just going to put it kind of in the middle of the site. Now I'm going to select the outer site and I'm going to go right click and convert it to an editable poly. Now I'm going to just scroll down and attach the middle dot. So now they're one object. And I'm going to name this, guess we could just name it scope. Yeah, that's important. Make sure you do name it scope. So now our scope is pretty much formed for the most part. Alright, so next I'm going to tell you guys how to align the hierarchy with the actual attachment with the actual dummy, dummy or bone that the site will attach itself to through the config files. I'm having problems with the attachment top, so we're going to be using the attach silencer because I know that one works. And I've successfully gotten it working. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and select your scope again. And over here in the hierarchy tab, there's an effect pivot only button. That is what we're going to be using. So I'm actually going to right click unhide. No, I don't want to unhide all. I want to unhide by name. And I want to unhide silencer attach. Go ahead and click unhide. Now you're going to see this show up. So now we're going to go ahead and click effect pivot only. And we're going to copy this X coordinate. Then we're going to click on our scope, and then I'm going to paste into this X coordinate. We're basically changing my scope's hierarchy point to be the same as this silencer attach. That way when we attach it, it doesn't offset like crazy. So once again, we're just copying and pasting the coordinates from the silencer attach to the scope. And there we go. Unclick effect pivot only, and your scope is now in the correct position. One important thing that I do need to note as well, when you make dramatic changes like building and attaching things, you need to go over to your Tools tab and reset Xform. And then click the Reset Selected button. Make sure you have your scope selected when you click Reset. And what that's going to do, if you go back over to the Modifier tab, you're going to see Xform. That's very important. If you don't do that, it'll be rotated and deformed and things like that. So I'm actually going to collapse this back to an editable poly now. Once you reset the Xform, you can collapse it back to an editable poly if you need to make any slight changes. But I do recommend resetting the Xform each time you make any polygon, face, element, whatever you modify. Alright, so including with this tutorial, I'm going to give you my texture files that we're going to be using for this scope because I don't want to put a texture tutorial in this. You'll have 3 files. You'll have the material file, which is what 3ds Max will use, well, the model technically will use to reference where these textures are located. Put the 2 DDSs, the gray and red, just in your basic game objects folder. And this dev.mtl file, go ahead and put it in your game objects weapons scar folder right here where we're working with our 3ds. Alright, another correction I have to make here. If you go into the scar folder, game objects weapons scar, the dev material file, this does not go in here. This needs to actually go in our attachments folder with our scope. And in the objects, you'll have your 2 texture files. So now back into Max, go ahead and open up your material editor. Some of you might see the slate material editor. I do not use the slate material editor. I use the compact. So go ahead and scroll down to an empty square where there's basically just pick one that doesn't have something already in it, and go ahead and click the standard button. Change it to a multi-sub object. Discard old material. Sure, why not? I'm going to set this number to 2 because I only need 2 materials. The first one is going to be gray. Second one's going to be red. Up here at the top, right here, make sure you name this to dev because that is the name of our material file. Yeah, make sure that's named dev. That's very important. Go ahead and click on the grays none button right here. Go ahead and click standard. Make sure you change the shader basic to Crytek shader. I'm going to physicalize it because it doesn't hurt. And then I'm going to scroll down here to maps category, expand it, check the diffuse color button and select the map. Now I'm going to make sure I select bitmap, hit OK, and it's going to ask me, where would I like to go? I'd like to go to my game objects. Game just objects. Here we go. There's the gray.dds. And I'm going to click show shaded material in viewport. And then I'm going to go up and up again. Now I'm going to click red and do the same thing. Standard, Crytek shader, physicalize, maps, diffuse, bitmap, red. Show in viewport, up. I don't know if this part matters, but see how it says material number 23, material number 24. If you click on that button and then just change this to gray, I think this makes our material ID a little bit easier, which we're going to do here in a second. So now that you have gray and red, gray, red in the dev category here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag up in this view here. I'm just going to drag this right to our scope. And you'll notice how the inside turned red and the outside turned gray. It might not do that exact same thing for you, but that's basically what we want. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and close the material editor. We're going to get the scope in view here, and over here, editable poly, we're going to expand it. We're going to go to polygon. Now I'm going to hit Control A, which is going to select all of them, and I'm going to scroll down on the right here, and you will see Set ID. Set ID to 1, it'll say gray. So right now everything's gray. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to select that little dot there, and I'm going to set that ID to 2. Now if you notice it's red. The rest of the scope is gray and that is red. Perfect, that's what we want. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and export this model. Alright, so before we export, we are going to strip this scene down to just the scope element and save it to a different point. That way when we do export it, it exports it to the correct location so we don't have to move it. So first thing, go ahead and right click, unhide all. Yes. Now select just your scope. Make sure you have just your scope selected. Now right click, hide selection. Now basically the only thing hidden is your scope. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control A and then delete. So now, if I right-click unhide all, the only thing that's going to be there is our scope, and there's going to be the default Crytek entity here. So, not entity, but bone, so, or dummy, I should say. So just go ahead and leave that there. So basically, the only thing on our view now is the scope, and that's about it. So now we're going to go to File, Save As. Make sure you don't save over your old one. We want Save As for this. Alright, so as you can see, we are in the SCAR folder. We do not want to be in the SCAR folder. So we're going to go up 1. And now we're in the weapons folder. Now we're going to go up 1 more again and make a new folder called attachments. Now I'm going to name this scope. If I can learn how to spell. Now, if I go to weapons, objects up in here, see how I have attachments, and now I have scope. Now this is our max file. This is not actually our exported model that we're going to use for in-game. So now we go back into max, go over to your CryEngine 3 exporter section, add selected. Oh, well actually you have to make sure you have it selected first. Add selected scope. Export file for nodes, fine. This is geometry, a CGF, not a CHR. There's no animation or bones involved in this. So it's just basic geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and hit export nodes and done. Now if you look back in our attachments, there's our created file. So from here we're going to go and configure the XML files to actually use this site. Okay, so while I was getting ready to structure this to show you guys how to work the XMLs, I realized that the example assets nor the SDK give you the scripts extracted to modify the weapon files. So we're actually going to have to create the directories and extract the XML files from the scripts container. So this is going to be kind of fun. Inside the free SDK game folder, you're going to right click new folder scripts. I'm not sure if these are case sensitive, but I'm going to do it anyways, capital S. So go and then go into scripts, new folder, entities, new folder, items, if I can spell, new folder again, XML, all caps, and then I believe weapons. Yes, weapons. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the game folder, and I'm going to open up this scripts container folder. I'm not sure what the default extension is. It's a .pack file. I use WinRAR to open these, so I'm just double click. It'll open it up here. And I'm going to go into scripts, entities, items, XML, weapons, and here's the SCAR XML. So now I got to go over here, scripts, entities, items, XML, weapons, and I'm simply just going to drag it into here. We're going to have to do that same thing here very short. Actually, might as well do it now. Go ahead and go back to your XML file here, and I believe, yeah, accessories. So create a new folder called accessories, open that up, and just copy the silencer. We'll use the silencer for reference. So now you can go ahead and close that. I'm actually going to rename this right now to scope. Go ahead and open it up and change this top name to scope as well. Lowercase. First thing we need to add in here to make the scope functional would be this line. Scope attachment value equals 1. Next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to, this isn't necessary, but we're going to use this line, auxiliary name. What auxiliary name does is it uses a different model from when you're not ironed to when you are ironed, or zoomed in, so to speak. So that's what this is going to be used for. So let's actually, all of these need to be objects, weapons, attachments, scope.cgf, scope.cgf, and scope. Normally this would be something like scope zoom, but we're going to be using the same model for both. This is just a point of reference for future, because a lot of the times you don't want to use your unironed model for your iron-sided model, because you can eliminate polygons, you can clean it up, you can make it more high poly so it actually looks better when you zoom in. Also, sometimes there's a lot of parts of it you don't need when you're zoomed in, or some parts that you don't need when you're not zoomed in. So this gives you the option to use two different models when you're zoomed in and when you're not. So that's basically what that is. So now that those are all set to your scope models, and scope attachment is set to 1, go ahead and save that. Alright, here's the little edit in. Actually, when we exported the model from Max and saved it, I put it in the wrong directory. I did not put it in weapons attachments. So there's two ways you can do this. You can either go move your project file to weapons attachments, or we can, actually we'll go do that. See, if I go into game objects, I put attachments here. This attachments folder should actually be in the weapons folder, so I'm just going to drag this into the weapons folder. Now it should be weapons attachments, and then the scope should be here. So then it should align with this file correctly. Now, oh, where am I? Okay, go back into your game scripts, entities, items, XML, and go into your weapons folder and open up the SCAR this time. We're going to go to Control F, zoom mode. Going down, keep going, keep going. Okay, until you get to the zoom modes category. Now you'll see iron sight here. What we're going to do is I'm going to select this whole from zoom mode name down to the ending of the zoom mode, and I'm going to duplicate it. So now I have 2 of them. That looks terrible. Iron sight. I'm actually going to change this to scope zoom. Type, I believe, yes, we need to change this type from iron sight to scope. Make sure you capitalize the S in scope. Now, what we're going to do is we need 2 variables in here. These 2. We need scope mode and scope offset. Scope offset is what is going to be used to align your scope as soon as you zoom in. The game, unfortunately, does not X perfectly and things like that. So, these 3 variables separated by commas, if the world was perfect, they would all be X, Y, and Z would be set to 0, 0, 0. But they're generally not. I do have to tell you, when you make adjustments to this later on, you want to do very small increments like this, etc. Because if you were to do a full-on 1.0, it would literally put it a meter to the right. So make sure you have scope mode offset in there. And now we're going to go ahead and actually add the attachment. Oh, here's your zoom stage as well. So we're going to make this a 4x. So we'll make it down there. So now go ahead and scroll to the very bottom. You'll see accessories. Got to copy some more code out of here. Initial setup. This is very important as well. Unless you have a full menu integrated into your level or into your game, the attachment will not go on by default unless you have this in there. So, right under accessories here, initial setup category. What this is going to do is this is going to put the attachment that we have specified down here in just a second. It will initially attach it as soon as you have that gun in your hands. So, let me see. I gotta copy some more code out of here for you. Initial setup. Accessory name is going to be scope. And like I said, all this code will be included. So, don't worry about that. Zoom mode. Scope zoom is what I called it. I hope. The attachment helper, we are leaving it silence attached, like I said when we were doing the modeling. I had issues with the attachment top not working. So we're just going to leave that layer scope. That's fine. And that's the extent of the XML editing. As soon as we get in-game to test it, like I said, if you go back up to the zoom mode, where's the zoom mode? Scope zoom and the scope offset, you will constantly need to adjust this and relaunch every single time you adjust this. So this is probably where you're going to live. This variable here, you're going to live here for probably the next 30 minutes, I would say, between testing. So that's what we're going to go do next. Alright, so now we're going to in-game to test. Alright, there's our terribly cheesy scope. As you can see, in my map, I have put a dot in the very center of the screen to help me align it. And I will actually include that flow graph as well. That way, if whatever level you're using, you just want to go in there and throw it in. That way you can help align the dot. But if you look, you can tell the dot is very high. So now from here, what you do is you quit. You go back into your SCAR config file to this, and you edit it from this point. I believe X is left and right. Y is forward and backward as far as how far the scope is away from your face. So if I were to put this up to about 1, that should pull it away a decent amount. Now we're going to need to move it down. So if I believe down is minus like 0.001, should make a considerable difference. So let's try that. Alright. See how the scope is actually a little bit farther away from my face now? We're not clipping through the model as bad. And it has moved down a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and quit that again. Might have to do something like that. Yeah, I think that might be it. Let's try that. I think I might have been going too small of an increment on the Y. There we go. See, now there's an extreme difference. We're getting closer, but we're not quite there. And it's still going to need to go down a little bit, so let's go to 1.5. Alright, let's see. Oh, now we're getting close. Oh, see, now we're a little too low. And if you notice, we're off to the right. Just a hair. So let's try 2.0, and I believe 0.001 should make a considerable difference. Oh, I went the wrong way. Ah, see, now we're getting super close. But 0.001 is too big of a stage, so I'm actually going to put 0.5. And this needs to be, oh, I think I'm a little high actually. So 9. That should be close enough. Alright, and there we go. As you can see, the red dot is just slightly high, which is actually where it should be. So, alright, so this turned out to be my final alignment. I've been doing this for years, so that took me roughly 8 or 9 game launches to get that, but it's pretty much spot on now. So most of the time that you change your Y value, your depth from your eye or your eye relief, if you want to call it that, it will change this and possibly this just enough to throw your aim off. So just be aware that I would recommend setting this Y value first, which would be your eye relief or depth from the scope. Once you get that to a position to where you like it, Then from there on, go to your X and Z. So I hope this tutorial worked out good for you guys, and I hope to see some awesome sites come to the community, and I do 100% encourage open source free releases. I do realize some of you guys want to make games and maybe you want to make money off them, whatever, but if you don't, please release them, because there is a very small amount of assets for CryEngine 3 out there, and I really want to see more come to the community so that we can learn from them and improve on them, or even integrate them into our free projects. So thanks for watching, and hope it helps.